Great. So we've got Kirk Simpson, and Alex is going to interview him in a fireside chat. So I'll introduce Kurt first. I think you all probably know who he is, but I'm gonna read this anyways because it's pretty impressive. So Kurt was a co-founder of Wave in 2010. The company has 400,000 active small business accounts, 250 people on the team, and over 100 million in funding raised. So it's a pretty good Canadian story if you follow a lot of the smaller raises and companies in Canada. This is one of my favorites to have followed over the years. Wave has also won numerous awards for leadership and culture innovation, including the Deloitte Fast 50, KPMG FinTech 100, and Great Places to Work in Canada. And Kurt is also involved with Next 36 and provides mentorship to younger entrepreneurs. So really, really excited to hear about his recent success.
Yeah, it's been great. Wave has been churning out like really capable people for many, many years, and we've been very happy to get to know some of them and have them come and work with us over the years. So kudos to you, Kirk. Without you, it wouldn't be possible. Speaking with Kirk tonight is Alex. So Alex is the co-founder of TechToronto. So like this whole ball got started rolling because of Alex and Kirk's efforts. He's also a Canadian partner at AngelList. He's the general partner at N49P. Really rolls off the tongue, but he's invested in over 25 early stage Canadian companies during this time. He's worked in mergers and acquisitions at Lehman Brothers. He's worked as a consultant in McKinsey & Co. In startups in San Francisco and New York. And some quick fun facts, because I love this part about Alex. Alex paid for his education by selling comic books, including his copy of Superman 1. I know, right? What's the missed opportunity cost there? And he grew up with 4 sisters, 1 washroom, and 1 phone line. So with no further ado, let's welcome up Alex Norman and Kirk Simpson.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, I guess we get these seats. I think I should be interviewing you after that long intro, dude. You've done many good things.
Well, you're the one that's actually made a big dent in the city from this tech ecosystem. So it's my honor to actually have you up on stage. My goal today is to cover a few things. One is, your career before Wave, the time at Wave, and what's post Wave. Because I think everyone hears about the acquisition and thinks you're an overnight success. So let's start with your career. I think you left school and you started a business. So tell us about your decision to do that, what the business was, and what happened.
Yeah, so I was very concerning to my mom for a long time. I dropped out of university when I was 18 after 1 year and went to Australia and Fiji and came back and got a waitering job and started thinking about starting a company. My friend and I started a adventure listing directory in 1997 called CanadianAdventure.com. And then we decided to start webcasting adventure events in around 1999. It was a terrible idea. We had no idea really what we were doing. We were probably, I guess, if I do the math, I was probably 24 when I started, 23 when I started. We raised some angel financing. The ecosystem has changed a lot since then. We raised $100,000. And the way that the guy wanted to give us the money was essentially to do $20,000 increments over 5 months. And we had to chase him for 3/4 of the month to get our $20,000. So it was a really good use of our time to chase his money. So anyways, we went bankrupt, as you would expect, in 2000. But we learned a lot of interesting things. We were really pushing on the edge of technology at the time. I'll always remember we were covering a mountain bike race in BC, and the mountain bikers would be coming down the mountain, and we had a Sony Mavica camera with a 3.5-inch floppy disk in it, and you had to press a button when the mountain biker was about here to hopefully get the mountain biker in the frame. And then we were uploading those photos from the top of the mountain on a satellite phone that was the size of a briefcase, weighed about 20 pounds. And the upload speed was like 2.5 KB a second. And it would constantly crash about 3/4 of the way through. So it was not a good idea. but it was super fun and a great learning experience.
So I assume you weren't doing live videos.
We were trying, and we actually had to deal with Windows Media Player. So for all of the people who are like 25, they have no idea what I'm talking about. None of these brands are still around, but we were starting to push into video, and it was a fascinating time.
So the company failed, but what did you learn? What were your takeaways?
It's a great question. I don't know that I reflected a lot on it. I came out of that experience. Well, one of the things I learned was don't put your own capital at risk, because I came out about $50,000 in debt because chasing that guy to get the money ended up not working so well. I think we learned a lot of grit and determination. We had to do, pretty much everything. We kind of maxed out around 11 people. And so we were, everything from the janitor to the receptionist to the, salesperson, all the way in between. And actually, it was a really concerning moment for me when we finished, because I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I had dropped out of university now twice because I attempted to go back and then dropped out again. And I was really concerned. I was close to $50,000 in debt. And the challenge with entrepreneurs is that when you have to do everything to keep the business alive, you don't get really good at any one given thing. And so I was super concerned about it. And there was a woman by the name of Carolyn Meacher at a publishing company that was moving online. And if it wasn't for her calling me and asking me what I was going to do next, I probably wouldn't be here today.
And so what did you do next?
So I went to a media company called St. Joseph Media at the time, Key Media, then it was bought by St. Joseph Media. So Toronto Life, Fashion, Wedding Bells, Wear Magazine, etc. And to be honest, those 5 years were probably the most formative of my career, because I had amazing leadership from Carolyn and this guy by the name of Blair Graham. They allowed me to be entrepreneurial in an environment where I was still getting a paycheck, which was super important to me at the time. And I think, just to tie this back to Wave for a second, I think one of the most important things that Carolyn taught me was she gave me so much ability. She believed in me. She gave me a ton of ability to push myself and innovate. And when I was thinking about Wave with James Lockery, my co-founder, we really talked about what if we could create an environment where, people have the experience that I had under Carolyn. And I think a lot of what we're trying to do from a culture standpoint is to try and replicate that. And if you were to put it in a soundbite, it would be, how do you create an environment that becomes the formative, experience in somebody's career?
Can you expand on that? What do you mean by formative? Like, how did you push yourself? I think most people, especially when they get out of university, think they're pushing themselves. So what made us different? How do you actually explain this?
I don't know. I think, I'll always remember, this is maybe a silly story, but I'll always remember the moment that I got to Key Media and I was working with Carolyn and she was pulling me into meetings with really senior people. She'd always introduce me and say, this is Kirk. He ran this incredible company doing amazing things, and we are so lucky to have him. And just that gave me the confidence that I needed at that time, that somebody believed in me, somebody had seen what we were doing. It's just setting people up for success, lifting them as much as possible into the opportunity, and then wherever possible, just letting them run and supporting them through the process. I think, if I were to summarize it, that's kind of what I took from it.
And you mentioned she reached out to you. So it was interesting because you had started the company, you had failed, and you feel like you had generalist skills. So what did she see in you? Why did they need you at that point?
It's a good question. We should ask her. But, we had done a partnership with Canadian Geographic, and Canadian Geographic was part owned by this company. And so she had heard about some of the things that we were trying to do through that partnership. And so we sent out an email saying we were going under, and that all the content would be archived and then gone in 30 days or whatever. And she reached out and said, I hate to be a vulture, but what are you going to do next? And that set me up to be here.
And how long did you stay in corporate Canada?
For a while, I was at Key Media for probably 6 years, and then I went to Quebecor, canoe.ca. Again, nobody really knows what I'm talking about. Dating myself in a big way. And I started something while at Canoe because, quite frankly, I know this is being videotaped, right? But
Yeah, we can blank it out.
yeah. Anyways, that was like
I don't think anyone worked at Canoe. But anyways, what were you
Okay.
saying?
yeah.
Still
That
works
was
at Canoe.
that was a fucking horrific experience. That, you know, and in some ways what was so interesting was that Key Media was kind of the shining light for me of what great culture looked like. And it started with Michael DePontier that started the company. I mean, he was an incredible entrepreneur and an incredible human being, very involved in climate and earth stuff way back when it wasn't cool. Anyways, then we go to Quebecor and it was the exact opposite, right? And I always talk about the fact that you're in a shitty environment when you're sitting around a boardroom table and it's a meeting about, how are we going to do better or drive more innovation or whatever, and someone comes up with an idea and basically everybody in the room tries to not be roped into doing anything about that idea. It's like, oh, I'm too busy, or they're hiding under the boardroom table. Like, that was the environment. And so in some ways it was great to be there because I learned a bunch of stuff, including what not to ideally set yourself up as.
So if you had one key thing not to do that you learned there, what would that be? Or two? Was it culture or was it just something else?
No, I think it was culture. And I look at Quebecor today and I just think that starts from the top in a lot of ways, right?
Cool. So you weren't enjoying yourselves there, and then I think you went to start another action sports.
Yeah.
startup.
I don't know what I had with that. I loved doing it, but it didn't relate to good business ideas. So we started a company called Outdoorsica, and blah blah blah. Bottom line is, what I learned is you can't do it part time. All of us were part time, and it just doesn't work part time.
So I guess I think I read an article when you were doing that, or just when you started Wave. Did you ever sell Outdoorsica?
I did, yeah.
So this is your second acquisition.
Yeah, I think I don't know, bought some coffees or something with the proceeds of the first one.
Oh, at least it's not $50,000 in debt.
Exactly.
So you were doing that part time, and you were in digital media. You started 2 adventure sports related sites, then Wave.
Yeah.
That seems like a natural transition. Tell me about that transition from outdoor sports to accounting.
Right. So, so the first thing is being an entrepreneur a couple times over with no real skills. You realize that, and I know this is trite, but like all of the back office stuff just gets in the way of most entrepreneurs. And so it was a natural, and my sister is a CPA, so she kept me out of trouble many, many times. And so when James and I started talking about things, and we had all sorts of different ideas, and they were pretty much all bad. And then we started centering around this, and James was the CTO of a small tax prep company, and so he knew the space. And I came at it from the small business side and saying there's a real opportunity here. It's a real pain point. QuickBooks is, and especially QuickBooks Desktop way back in the day, is not the solution for most people. And so maybe there's something we can do here. And then we started to look at the size of the market and understand it better. And, the ball started rolling. It was not one of those, like, I wish we had one of those founding stories, and maybe I should make one up now and changed history, but
You can make it up right here, and it'll be
perfect.
lore from now on.
Awesome.
No one here heard it was made up.
But we just sort of bumbled our way into it and thought, there's something to this, and then started playing around with it. And I've talked about the fact that this was peak Mint. So hopefully that's current enough that people know what Mint is.
If you know Mint, put up your hand.
All right, that's
We're
good.
safe.
Okay. Who knows Canoe, by the way?
Oh,
Not bad.
okay. Those people have all lived in Canada for at least 10 years.
Right. So we were heavily influenced by what Mint was doing on the personal finance side, because 2010 they were super hot. I think they sold in 2011. And so we just put two and two together and started getting at it.
So I have to ask a question about James. Where how did you know him? How did you know this is someone you wanted to start a company with?
So James is married to my wife's great friend from university. So when I started to date, they're a little bit older than us. So when I started to date my wife, I'm soon to be wife, I met James, and we started hanging out, and then we started to travel together with families, and we just got to know each other, and he's really laid back and chill, and I'm totally not. So it worked. And as a CTO of a tax prep company, he really understood what the back end of the system needed to do, and the space. He'd spent time with hundreds of small business owners in their living room looking at the disaster of their financial life. And I came at it from the entrepreneur side, and we thought it was interesting. In some ways, I think you can't overthink these things, right? You just go with your intuition. Oftentimes, that's really what's led me, and this was another example.
So take us back to the first few months. I think it was 2010. You decided this is what you're going to do. What was your grand vision back then? What do you think from a company culture perspective? What were you thinking at that point? Did you know it was going to be a 10-year journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we started the business in 2009, got serious about it in early 2010. And we very much thought that the data advertising play was going to be, the big thing. And, we started on that front, et cetera, et cetera. There's a few waivers who are kind enough to support me by coming today. And one of them's Les, in the back corner there, the tall guy, you can't miss him. Yeah, woo. Yeah. So lots of energy in here tonight.
Come on, guys.
So I met Les, and I pretty much hunted him down and stalked him until he joined Wave. And Les brought all of the expertise around financial services products. And one of the things that I think is interesting about a journey like ours and a lot of startups is so much of this comes down to whether or not you've got headwinds or you've got tailwinds. And I think for a long time, we had a lot of headwinds. And when Les came on board and we started moving more and more towards financial services, and the world started moving more and more towards fintech, like if you look at the Google trend word of fintech, I mean, it's really, 5 years maybe, that it's really blossomed. And so we started picking up a lot of tailwinds. And I tell you, that is super, super important for a startup. Startups are, as we all know, super, super hard. And if you're fighting headwinds all the time, it's incredibly challenging. When you start getting tailwinds and you're pushing forward on the market, it's just way easier.
So you said there's been headwinds for 5 years. You've been doing this for 10 years. So how did you make it through those first 5 years? And what changed that there was headwinds?
So we had some really, really dark, interesting, formative, now I can use all these nice words about it, but at the time it was incredibly difficult. Sort of peaked in 2015. So, quick timeline. We raised from OMERS, we were OMERS Ventures' first investment in 2011, spring of 2011. We did our Series A, that was a seed round. We did our Series A in the fall of 2011 with CRV, amazing firm, by the way. 2012, I think I'm getting my timelines right. 2012-ish, 2013, we raised from social capital during peak social capital. So Chamath
Before it was a family office.
That's right. Chamath was on fire. I remember meeting him at the Four Seasons in San Francisco. Like, it was just one of those kind of tech rock star moments of meeting Chamath. And he's incredible in so many ways. And so social capital led our B. And it was like everybody at the company, including James and I, thought like, this is just the norm, right? It's it's like up and to the right, and we didn't have any revenue, but we had lots of user growth and all that kind of stuff. And in 2014, we started hitting serious road bumps. I think we laid off people in early 2014. That is probably the most painful, obvious experience, but obviously incredibly painful for the people that we laid off, but as founders, just like gutting. And there's something interesting that happens where when people in the company start questioning whether or not they're on the rocket ship that they thought they were on, and bring doubt into the equation for the first time, it's amazing how that changes things. And it changes the culture, and you've got to be really, really, thoughtful through that process, or it can ruin a company.
Can you expand on that a bit more? So like, what was the culture before? How was the culture impacted? How did you handle this?
So I will admit to the fact that, by the way, my memory is a bit blurry, right? It all kind of compresses, but I just think that it's so easy to attract great people when, you're the hottest thing and you're raising from social capital and you're raising large rounds and all that kind of stuff, and everything looks great. And so you get a type of person through that process, maybe a great culture fit, maybe not, but a certain type of person. When you do a layoff like that, you really discover who's in it for what reasons. And we would have gone from, and again, foggy a little bit, but like 85 to 60. And the people that were there that stayed, I mean, they were committed, and they redoubled their efforts. And we were as transparent as possible, but that's, super hard through the process. So I think it's just, it separated a little bit the people that were there for, for the customer, for the right reasons, for the work, versus just attaching to something that was, hot at the time.
So you've gone through that hot period, you hit the dark patch.
Mm-hmm.
What turned it around? How did you know you guys were going to get through this and survive? I'm going to ignore that sign. I know.
So I think, the darkest point was in 2015. We were days away from insolvency. The board and the VCs, candidly, were a challenge through that process. And it was really just hold on as best you can and try and survive. And I think a lot of this has come out a lot, and I think it's really, really important for entrepreneurs to think about, is just in that moment, if you can survive another day, another week, another month, you never know what's going to happen. And I think, the fun thing is that's kind of our journey. And sorry. No. I was just going to say, like, the one part of this, forget about the outcome and the dollars and all that kind of stuff, although it's good.
And it's great for this ecosystem.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think, I'm super proud of the people that have come out of Wave. I'm always heartbroken when they leave, but incredibly proud of, the work that they're doing in the ecosystem. So that's all great. Now I totally forgot what I was going to say.
So you're talking about how you got through that.
Right.
Period.
So sorry. The thing that I was going to say is just like, we got to experience every part of startup life, every part, the highs, the lows, the acquisitions that broke down, the rounds that broke down, the VCs who pulled out at the end, the almost going bankrupt, the layoffs, all of those kinds of things. And obviously, in hindsight, with this outcome, it's you can romanticize that, but also just from the experience standpoint, it was remarkable.
I have many questions, but I want to open it up in a few minutes to the audience because I'm sure they'll have better questions than me. So just go through this process. So you go through this dark times. You're like a cockroach. You continue surviving, and then
just call me a cockroach.
Sorry, Wave was like, in a complimentary way. I think.
Yeah, for sure.
No, because I think
cockroaches.
No, actually, I think unicorns is an overused term in startup land, but the cockroaches are the ones that actually make all the money in the end, because you can get a unicorn and then go to zero.
True.
So, well,
Okay.
this is gonna look.
We'll
Really
roll
bad.
with that.
It's gonna look really bad on the video. So yes, so you survive, and you said, again, did growth start accelerating? What do you think? Was there one thing, or was it many of the small things that allowed you to thrive again?
So I think one of the biggest mistakes that I look back on, and I think we started to correct it in 2015, and I've talked about this, so sorry if I'm repeating myself,
Yeah.
but we didn't have a good enough product, and we were relying on being free for overcoming product deficiencies. And sadly, I lost a friend in 2015, a good friend of mine. And I remember walking around San Francisco before I flew home for his funeral and thinking to myself, I'm the CEO, co-founder of a company, and I'm not proud of our product. Why? Why am I doing this? And, it was a long haul, and we're still not there to get it to where we need to be. But I think that was one of the biggest turning points for us, is when we said we're no longer free is gonna be just an amazing marketing advantage and a pricing advantage, but we're not gonna let it seep into anything other than that. And I think that was one of the biggest turning points.
Cool. I'm gonna ask two questions before opening it. One is, you get acquired. So when do you start the relationships with acquirers? Because people say good companies purchased, not sold. So is that true? And what insights do you have on that process?
Yeah, so this is, I think, really, really unique, and for most people, if they had to put a list of acquirers together for a Wave, probably H&R Block wouldn't have been high on that list, which is super cool, I think. But literally, it came together. I met the CFO and the biz dev guy in November of last year. I'm directionally accurate on this. In February, he reached out and said the CEO wants to come and meet you. In March, Jeff Jones, an incredible CEO, former president of Uber, really great person, flew up in third week of March, and the deal closed on June 28th.
And why get acquired instead of raise another round?
I talked before about intuition. So as a founder, there is nothing better than the board, your wife, your co-founder, the executive team doing exactly what you want them to do in this situation, which is them saying, we will do whatever you think is right. And I can't thank the board enough for having, and the exec team and my wife and my co-founder for giving me that. At the end of the day, that's a really, really heavy burden. So you want it, but then you get it and you're like, geez. And I kept waking up wanting the answer to be clear, and for me to just know. And it never really came to me that clearly. I just had to trust my intuition around, it's been a long time. I got a lot of scars through the process. We've raised a lot of money. We've got a lot of investors who, backed us. Those investors in 2009, 2010, there was no reason for them to give us money. And returning capital to them, one of the most important reasons is because from a customer perspective, we now have the opportunity to actually deliver what we want to deliver for the customers. And I'm super passionate about small business owners. And I think the VC, train was a difficult way to build this kind of a platform unless you had breakaway success early on, which we did at the beginning and then went through a rough patch. And so when I put all those factors together, plus what I just fundamentally believe is a changing market over the next 18 months, I just looked at it and said, I think this is the right call. But it was a challenge.
Wow, great answer. Let's open it up to the crowd. And if no one puts up their hand, I have like 25,000 more questions. Yeah, very insightful.
Hey.
Oh, hey.
Yeah, just a product question.
Yeah.
When you identify your original sort of consumer base, what's your process of iterating on the experience with them? Like, what are some of the lessons you've learned in that area?
Difficult to summarize that, to be honest. I would say, the macro, just learn from our mistakes. Number one, the free thing. Free is a great marketing tactic. It's a terrible product strategy. Number two, we went too broad too fast. And so we created too wide an ecosystem where we were stretched thin across all. And I am naturally positively inclined and love new ideas. So it's like, ooh, shiny new thing, let's go do it. Without really thinking about the implications downstream from that in terms of once it's in market, continuing to iterate on it, make it better. And also just some of the, underlying platform things that need to evolve to support that much breadth. So I think those were the two biggest lessons. If I were to do it again, I would do it differently around those two things. And I think, early on, and I think this has changed in the ecosystem, which I think is great. But we were a tech company, highly dominated by engineering in the early days, especially. And I think a lot of us just loved the tech. We didn't really understand how to solve customer pain points. We wanted to use new technology, and I think a lot of the engineers, we didn't have enough empathy for the customer built into the culture at the beginning. I think that's something that we changed in 2015 as well, maybe before, I don't remember, but I think those three things, if that's helpful.
Hi, Kirk. Thanks for being here and for sharing your story. As a co-founder of a company that has fundraised in Canada and the US, and as a mentor that's part of, our national accelerator that promotes entrepreneurship in Canada, I would love to hear you speak candidly about your experiences and your thoughts on raising money in Canada with Canadian VCs and American VCs. Like, I've heard a lot of stories about Canadian startups struggling.
We may not. If you want, we can swipe. We can answer honestly, and we won't show this video.
Is that true? Either
We
way,
could do it.
I actually don't care anymore. That's a nice thing. I don't have to raise any more money.
The benefits of an exit.
Yeah, exactly. So my experiences have been that. So the challenge for the Canadian VC ecosystem is they don't see enough deals, and so. Our partner at CRV, gentleman by the name of Devdutt Yulurkar, amazing human being. And I say that first because that's really, really important to me, and an incredible VC. And if I were to compare and contrast the depth of knowledge that he has about what's going on in the ecosystem, I'll give you a silly example. You're launching a mobile app and you want to understand what usage rates should look like, what's best in class. It's those little things where they just have so many more data points that they can help you sort of understand the trends far, far better. They're just seeing so much more deal flow. And I think that's a challenge. So I think I always wanted to support the Canadian ecosystem. I still do. But I think we've got a lot of maturing to do in the venture capital side. Just like, quite frankly, we still have to do on the founder side. I think both of us need to raise our game. It's not one side or the other. It's both of us. But I don't think they're any different. So that said, I had some really bad experiences in the US too, right? Where there's a level of what's the word for it? Just arrogance and that is stifling at times. So I've experienced both sides, and generally you don't experience that as much in the Canadian VC ecosystem. But I think, you know, both the founders and the companies themselves, as well as the VCs, have a lot of continued maturity that we need to do in this ecosystem to get it to where we want it to be.
That wasn't that scandalous.
Afterward. Okay.
My name is Joseph, and my question is, when you had a difficult time, like in terms of like money and everything goes wrong, what was the sort of makes you keep moving like forward? Like what sort of motivate you to keep doing what you're doing? I just wanna like know, like what was your answer?
A deep sense of commitment to the people that work there, the investors who had trusted us with the dollars, even though they were a pain in the ass during that stage. I still felt a deep sense of commitment to our customers. And I'm just generally not a quitter. And I think just to be clear, that's an incredibly fine line, where I've met entrepreneurs who are like, yeah, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to, you know, put a second mortgage on my house. And I'm like, I don't know that that's a good idea. So it's a fine line. I think at that stage, and, you know, my wife, who's an incredibly successful person herself and an amazing human being, there was only one time in the entire 10 years where she was like, she looked at me during that time when we were, you know, right on the edge, and said, okay, is enough enough? Like, are we done yet? And my answer to her was just, I got to ride this thing all the way to the bottom if it's going to happen. But I'm not going to give up through the process. So I think it's just, but I want to make it clear, like it was kind of obvious to me that if I was going to ride it to the bottom, it was going to be over in like 3 months. So why would I not? So that line is very, very fine. And I would say don't go over the line, but if you can, just stay alive.
How's it going?
Good.
Jesse. You've cited intuition as a big part of your key to success in your current company. Just with the whole two sports companies now to an accounting company, how did you use your intuition to kind of make connections with people in that space that knew more than you while keeping a good handle on the operations?
Yeah, so you raised an interesting point. So I remember thinking to myself after the first failed startup that the number one thing that I needed to do was grow my network, because I had no one that I could call for any information and any help in any given topic, because I was just coming out of university and stuff. And so, you know, I made that a huge priority while I was working in corporate Canada, was to develop a Rolodex of people that I could call for help. And like I am never too afraid to ask someone for help and look stupid through the process. The only way I learn is through trying to do it and asking questions and trying to get smarter. And so that was my number one takeaway after the first failed startup, was that I needed to really expand my network of people that could help me.
One last question, maybe?
Okay. Hi, Kirk. When you said that you increased your focus on product quality and getting customer empathy, how did your product teams act differently after you made that decision, or how did you allocate resources differently to promote that in the company?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think Monty, who runs product, did an amazing job of that. I think like the story of Wave is really, really great people who are smart and committed and caring. And all I really needed to do was get the board on side to what we were going to do and where we were going to invest. And then the team took over. And, allocated appropriately, learned lessons on how we could gain better customer insight, all of those kinds of things. I'd love to take credit for it, but it really wasn't me. It was just an understanding that we needed to change something, get board approval to do it, and explain the rationale for why, and then let the team, do what they do. And all kudos to them.
Cool, that couldn't be better. Now you get the last question, you got to thank the team. Yes. So perfect question. Thank you for such an honest conversation. Could I get everyone to get up and give a standing ovation for Kirk? Very honest.